Hormones and anxiety are linked, not in a have you tried lavender way, more in a your body's broadcasting chemical messages 24/7 way. So if you're doing all the mindset things and still feel wired, foggy, exhausted, or randomly panicky, it probably isn't your personality, but it might just be your chemistry. And here's what you're going to get out of this podcast episode. The endocrine system explained in plain English, no medical textbook energy. Thyroid, cortisol, blood sugar signs that get mislabeled as anxiety. Endocrine disruptors, so the sneaky stuff messing with the messaging. 5 of the easiest swaps to reduce a load this week. So grab a cuppa and let's make it real. 2 people walk into a clinic. One's losing weight, sweating like they've just run a marathon. Heart racing, mind racing, anxiety through the roof. The other is exhausted, gaining weight, cold when everybody else is fine, brain foggy, barely functioning. Blood pressure, normal. Heart sounds, normal. Nothing obvious, and yet something is clearly off. You see, sometimes the problem isn't your heart, it's not your lungs, it isn't even you being dramatic. It's a few millimeters of tissue releasing the wrong amount of chemical signal. And that is your endocrine system. It's not woo, it's not vibes, it's your body's chemical communication network, and it's doing its thing. So if you're high functioning, overthinking human who lives with anxiety or anxiety adjacent chaos, this matters because it explains why you can look fine on paper but feel like a bin fire in your body. So back in 2015, a year or so into my therapy practice, I started doubting what I'd been taught at uni about mental health and healing. Not because psychology is useless, but because if it was the thing to help people heal, then I was witnessing something that didn't make a jot of sense. My clients would often get 40 to 60% better and then plateau. And I kept thinking, well, what on earth is going on? Why don't they recover fully? Why are they doing all the things, but they're still stuck? And I also had this really awkward personal truth sitting in the background of my mind. I had a suicide attempt in 2004, no therapy, no labels, no medication, and yet 11 years later I was not magically perfect, but pretty much thriving. Now, I'm not special. I'm legit the same as everybody else. So I started investigating the difference between their journey and mine, not for judgment, but for understanding. I knew my life was better and I hadn't ever tried to end it. So why couldn't they get to where I was? I was giving them the exact tools they needed at exactly the right time. And science shows that if A does B, then C happens. And I could not for the life of me understand why C was not happening. And I kept coming back to these 3 key pillars: diet, exercise, and sleep. These pillars, they are not wellness fluff. It's not neurology, not psychology, but they are vital biology and chemistry. Because if those 3 are off, your body quite literally can't manufacture the chemicals that you need to feel stable. And you may not know this about me. I grew up in an RAF base, and like all forces kids, we were poor, like proper poor. And back then in the 80s, if your mum was in the forces and she became pregnant, she was no longer allowed to serve. So from 2 incomes down to 1 with even more mouths to feed. And those houses we used to live in, they're not free, like you paid rent. And my mum quite often skipped meals so that we could eat, and dad would be off around the world putting his life online, and his family way back at home struggling to even get 3 full meals. But because of this, what we always ate was real food, like World War II style rationing based foods, which was fantastic because it was home cooked, it was basic, it wasn't processed. And one of my favorite meals was what we used to call eggy spaghetti, like literally 4 eggs, spaghetti, and a dash of parmesan. And if you've never had it, I highly recommend it. Sadly, sometimes my mum didn't even get a portion of that. And I even remember the day we had a rabbit stew. Like, dad refused to tell us what the meat was until after we'd eaten it. And in our house, if you didn't eat your dinner, then you'd go hungry. Like, the food you were given was all the food that there was. And also, I've had skeletal issues since birth. Like, I have a twisted pelvic gait affecting my hips, back, and even the ability to stand upright. Literally used to walk on all 4s like a monkey. Legs turned inwards. Forrest Gump, got nothing on me and he can eat my heart out. Actually, as an early claim to fame, I was papped for the medical text as a marvel. Like, my name was kept anonymized as my parents thought I wouldn't want the stigma. Like, if I could find those pictures, I'd have them pinned up on my wall as a reminder on the days when things get hard. So once I was finally upright, I was thrown into sports and gymnastics just to build muscle. So for most people, the skeleton's the structure and then muscles support it. For me, the muscles do the heavy lifting and my bones just stop me from becoming this giant jelly puddle. So movement, it wasn't optional. It was structural and it was a genuine necessity. Sleep, now that's always been really weird for me, like 3 to 5 hours as a kid, and I've never felt sleep deprived. Even now, between 5 and 6.5 hours, I'm fine. And the more I tried to figure out what the difference was between me and my clients, I just kept coming back to these three things. They didn't exercise, they ate whatever was easiest, and they slept for hours and hours and still ended up feeling exhausted. And I kept thinking to myself, like, it really can't be that simple. Like, if it's just diet, exercise and sleep, the heck had I spent tens of thousands of pounds and 7 years at university for? So I went hunting, and that took me into chemistry and biology and eventually understanding the power and importance of our hormones. And that discovery then flipped my world upside down. If you don't eat foods with the base amino acids and you don't exercise, your body will not produce the hormones that you need to be healthy. And then 2 years later, I found the dark side, that even if you're doing everything right, certain foods and chemicals can block your capacity to function properly. Thankfully for me, a couple of months later, I found essential oils and I personally haven't looked back. So think of it like you're creating a cake. Food's the base ingredients. Obviously. Heat exercises the heat from the oven, sleep is the time that it rests and fully sets, and then oils, they're kind of like the icing on the cake, which covers the wobbly bits or when things go wrong. And no, this is not a sales pitch to join a multi-level marketing scheme or even buy any essential oils. Just bringing you up to speed. Anyway, I'm never going to forget walking into somebody's house about 6 months after I'd cleared my own home full of chemical products. They had an Ambipure pumping their air freshener just throughout the house. The same kind that I'd used for years. And within minutes, I couldn't breathe properly. My skin felt like it had been bombarded. My head started pounding. I started to get a headache. It literally felt like every single one of my pores had been clogged. FYI, that isn't sensitivity. That's your body saying, what the chuff are you doing? This is not good. And there was a study done maybe 15 years or so ago now, which stated homes in the UK were 200 to 400 times more toxic than smog-fueled cities, which is truly insane. And right now, I get it. You're probably thinking, A, why does this matter? And B, when are you getting to the things that you said you talk about? Well, hold your horses, because here comes the science bit. We've got 2 types of glands in our bodies: exocrine and endocrine. So exocrine glands use ducts to send their non-hormone based products somewhere specific. So for example, salivary glands, which send saliva into your mouth. Endocrine glands, these are ductless and they release hormones. And because they are ductless, they release the hormones directly into the bloodstream. And this is key, because endocrine glands don't deliver locally, they broadcast. What they produce literally goes everywhere. And unlike the M6 or M25, there aren't traffic jams holding these things up. It takes 90 seconds. Why 90 seconds? Because that's how long it takes to your blood to do a full circuit around the body. And those broadcasts, they directly affect how you feel emotionally and physically. The things they broadcast, well, they're called hormones, and hormones, they're the chemical messengers of our body. And they are made by the endocrine cells, which are then released into your bloodstream, travel around your body, and only affect the cells that have the right receptor for it. So back in 1894, a German chemist, Hermann Emil Louis Fischer, who disliked Hermann so much he went by Emil, came up with the concept of lock and key to explain enzyme action. This theory was applied later to hormones and their receptors. So in non-science speak, and continuing this concept of your bloodstream being like a motorway, hormones are cars, receptors are the specific driveways they're allowed to pull into. No receptor equals no effect in the lock and key theory. But because there's always a but with research that's well over a century old. In 1953, Daniel Koshland, who's an American biologist, rocked up with the concept of induced fit, challenging the single lock and key concept. He introduced the concept of flexibility. So you think more like the lock, the receptor, isn't completely solid. There's a bit of wiggle room, which means when a close enough key, so your hormone, rocks up, it can still slip in there and trigger the chemical cascade. And here's why this matters. If your receptors are flexible, so close enough chemicals, including some meds and disruptors, can still flip those switches. And that's why your mood can change fast without your life changing at all. Kind of like when people are swiping incessantly on those dating apps, desperate for the one, but a close enough person comes along, and 3 days later, after the date from hell, they're dumbfounded by what happened. It's also how synthetically based medications work and why they sometimes go super hinky, triggering the wrong receptors. So for example, take cortisol, which is the body's main stress hormone made by your adrenal glands. It binds glucocorticoid receptors in cells, helping you handle short-term stress, like revving up your energy when you needed it. But synthetic versions like prednisone, used for things like asthma or arthritis, they have a similar shape and can sneak into the same receptor, which is awesome because that's how they reduce inflammation. But on the flip side, if they hit too hard or wrong, they can trigger side effects like mood swings, anxiety, or even mimic depression. This flexibility explains how synthetic medications work and why they sometimes go a bit wonky, either by binding to the wrong receptors or binding to way too many. Now then, in recent years, with the huge advancement of technology, this concept evolved even further into a dynamic process of switches being turned on or off based on what's going on inside the body. So sticking with this analogy of the motorway. So again, your bloodstream is a busy motorway full of cars, so hormones. Receptors, they're no longer regular old driveways from 1950s TV shows. They're smart driveways that don't just let the right car pull in, they adjust on the fly to let close enough cars through. Then to make things even more sci-fi, when the car, so your hormone, parks, it doesn't always do the same thing. Instead, it flips different switches inside the house, so your body cell, depending on the time of day, traffic conditions, or even the weather, all representing different body states like stress, hunger, or sleep. And in even plainer English, your body isn't looking for one perfect key, for one perfect lock. It's running a flexible system that adapts to context, which is pure genius until stress and modern inputs start hijacking the settings. So here's an example. In a chill state, cortisol, your stress hormone, pulls into its driveway, glucocorticoid receptor, and flip switches that calm inflammation and boost focus, helping you feel cool, calm, and in control. But under chronic stress, like ongoing work pressure or trauma, the system freaks out. The driveway decides it prefers certain parking conditions and cars over others, no longer being a flexible sci-fi driveway as designed, instead being really picky. And in the real world, resulting in switches flipping that amp up anxiety or low mood while completely ignoring ones for recovery. And in the science world, this is called bias signaling. The receptor is no longer neutral. It's wired itself to favor specific outcomes over all the potential outcomes based on evolution and your current biological state. In short, hormones aren't lone drivers anymore. They're part of a connected, adaptive system. Your body tweaks the rules based on needs, which is really pretty smart, until our mind treats the stress of being late for work in the same way as our ancestors felt about seeing a great hulking bear coming at them. And here's a practical takeaway. If you're chronically stressed, your system can start favouring survival settings over recovery settings. So the goal isn't more mindset pressure, it's changing your system's input, so things like sleep, food, movement, chemical load, etc., so that your biology has a chance to switch back. And these hormones, they are potent. They work at tiny concentrations, and you don't need much in your system to create a big shift, which is why you can feel like your whole life is falling apart from a microscopic chemical imbalance. Now, hormones come in 3 chemical classes. Each class affects how fast they act and how long they last. First up, peptide and protein hormones. These are the live fast, die young type, and they're made of amino acids. They're water soluble, so they travel easily in the blood, but it means they can't cross the cell membrane, so they bind to cell surface receptors and trigger a chemical cascade inside the cell. They tend to act fast, so seconds to minutes, but those effects, they really don't last long. So things like insulin, growth hormone, oxytocin, ADH all fall into this category. Next up, we have the steroid hormone. These are slower to get going and longer lasting, and they're made from cholesterol. They're lipid soluble, so they can cross the cell membrane. They bind to receptors inside the cell and then change gene transcription. And this is why chronic stress doesn't just make you feel stressed, it can change what your body's building and prioritizing. So hormones like cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all fall into this class. And finally, amino acid derivatives. And this is pretty much everything that's left. Kind of like the scientists gave up creating categories and just threw everything else into the same group. And they're made from a single amino acid. And we have things like thyroid hormones, so T3 and T4, which kind of behave more like steroids. We have adrenaline or noradrenaline that behaves more like peptides, and melatonin, which helps regulate your sleep-wake rhythm. And it also ends up in this category. Now, here's a quick tour of the major glands and why you should care. So the hypothalamus and pituitary, this is like your master control center. The hypothalamus controls the pituitary. The pituitary controls most other endocrine glands. So your stress, sleep, appetite, and reproductive systems are pretty much all nattering to each other constantly. Next up, your thyroid, and this is your metabolism dial. If thyroid hormones are too high, symptoms can look like anxiety, sweating, weight loss, rapid heart rate. If they're too low, symptoms look like fatigue, weight gain, cold intolerance, brain fog, and this one is the main reason I'm not a fan of telling people it's just anxiety, when chances are there's so much more going on behind the scenes, especially when it comes to women. As recent estimates suggest, 1 in 20 have a thyroid issue, often undiagnosed, with the most common being an underactive thyroid. Next up, adrenal glands. These are responsible for your stress chemistry. Adrenal glands release hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Cortisol helps you mobilize energy and survive stress, but chronic high cortisol can contribute to sleep disruption, blood sugar instability, immune changes, and energy crashes. Next up, your pancreas. So this is your blood sugar stability, aka mood stability's underrated cousin. Now the pancreas releases insulin and glucagon to keep the body glucose stable. If your blood sugar swings, your nervous system often swings with it. Not because you're weak, but because your body's trying to keep you alive. Next up, gonads, so your ovaries and your testes. And just in case you made it to adulthood without realizing this, ovaries and testes release your sex hormones. These influence reproduction, puberty, and a lot of why do I feel like a different person this week type experiences. Next up, your pineal gland. This is responsible for your impeccable or not sleep rhythm. The pineal gland releases your melatonin, and if you're anxious, sleep, it isn't a luxury. It's a nervous system requirement. Now, I want you to truly understand that no one is broken, even if you're sat there thinking, oh my God, all of my system is messed up right now. And even if you've sat there thinking your entire life is a mess, and though the entire world is on top of you, chances are you're most likely just chemically depleted. And one of the most common presentations I see in my therapy practice that gets labelled as anxiety or depression or burnout or, I'm broken, is this trio: low motivation, low energy, and brain fog. And yes, sometimes there is trauma. In my therapy practice, then it's always trauma, but I mean in the real world. Sometimes there's grief, sometimes there's a life that's just too heavy. But very often there's also a body that's underfueled, under-muscled, overstimulated, and chemically blocked. And you can not mindset your way out of a biological mess. So after that really long, windy road, we're finally getting onto the dark side I mentioned probably about 10 minutes ago. So endocrine disruptors are compounds that mess with the synthesis, secretion, transport, binding, or elimination of natural hormones. And they can enter the body via inhalation, ingestion, and touch. They can mimic or block hormones, and they're found across a wide range of things that we interact with on a daily basis, including things like food, pesticides, household products, plastics, electronics, clothing, and even personal care items. Now, before anybody panics, the goal is not perfection. The goal is reducing your load where it's easy. And here's your practical next step, because I'm not sending you off with a be mindful and a pat on the head. So first up, stop microwaving food in plastic. Now, this is the easiest win by far. If it's hot in plastic, your body will always be the one paying the price. And you should probably think about ditching the microwave as well, but I get it. Like, sometimes you just need a hot meal while multitasking. Second thing you can do is swap food storage to glass most of the time. So I use glass 95% of the time to store things. Sometimes plastic is genuinely safer, especially in the freezer. Those bad boys want frosty, have a habit of sliding out the freezer all on their own, and then you find yourself standing in the kitchen staring at shattered leftovers like a Victorian tragedy. So do what's realistic. You're human with a life, not a paid-for trad wife influencer who probably isn't actually doing all the things they say they are and they're recording. Thirdly, ban the chemical perfume vibe in your home. Like, throw these things out ASAP. Air fresheners, plugins, heavily fragrant sprays, scented candles, the lot. In a nutshell, if your house smells like a synthetic meadow, your hormones are fighting for survival. And as a little follow-up, give it 6 weeks or so and visit somebody who still indulges in these things and see how your body reacts. Like, feel free to circle back round and tell me exactly how it went. Fourth thing you can do is pick one cleaning product to replace. Start with the one that you use the most, whether it's your kitchen spray or a bathroom cleaner. One swap. You don't have to go all in on essential oils. It worked for me. This was over 10 years ago, and things have changed a lot since then. And the easiest tip I can give you about all of this to figure out whether what you're using is causing your mind and body conflict is to literally turn the shop bought product around and check that label. Now, if you see a hazard warning label like the one on the back of washing up liquid that says dangerous to aquatic life, even though we then tip the water down the drain, just stick it back on the shelf. Also, if you're after a super simple and highly effective all-purpose cleaner, which even works in the kitchen without chemicals or the often overwhelming and warlike essential oil marketplace, I've got you covered. Find the recipe in the show notes below. And fifthly, something you can do is treat food like fuel, not cuisine. Now, food, it doesn't have to taste like crap, but if every meal is built for dopamine and convenience, your body will eventually cash the check. Start simple, protein at breakfast, fewer ultra-processed snacks, and consistent meal times. Not a cleanse, it's not a diet, we're just after stabilizing your body, in particular your hormones. Now, you don't only need to focus on physical health if you're trying to lose weight. I want you to start thinking that mental wellness is the goal and fat loss, that's the side effect. That's the benefit that rocks up when you start focusing on doing things for your mental wellness. And if this made you think, oh, I'm not actually broken, and you definitely sound like you're my people, then you're going to love what we do inside the lab. It's not endless talking. It's not just fluffy affirmations and positive psychology. It's practical tools that help you regulate your system fast so that your hormones and your entire nervous system aren't constantly playing whack-a-mole. Link to join us in the description below.